Tell us about the night that everything happened.
I'm one of Caiaphas' most trusted servants, but that trust was put to the test the night the soldiers came to our doorstep. They had taken with them a man I didn't know who at first. A small group of maybe 10 or 12 followed them, along with a few of Caiaphas' servants. The soldiers asked permission to stay in the courtyard till they could schedule a court session. Caiaphas let them inside, and he put me in charge of guarding the gate. I was determined to keep the door no matter what. One of the soldiers pointed to a man and said to make sure that he did not enter. I kind of thought it was strange. Maybe he was some kind of threat. I saw the captive held by the guards. The captive looked at me just for a split moment, but I knew who he was. He was the rider, the man on a donkey who entered Jerusalem. When they entered, I closed the door behind them. The man stood next to me, looking through the cracks and holes of the door, trying to see what was going on. We stood there for what felt like hours of awkward silence before I finally asked him his name. He said his name was Peter, and a few moments passed, and I asked him if he knew this captive. Immediately, without thought, the man said, "I don't know what you're talking about." After a while, someone knocked on the door from the inside, and it was a man a little older than me. He told me that his name was John and that Caiaphas granted Peter access to the courtyard. So we entered the courtyard together and stood by a campfire next to my friends, Jimmel and a few other helpers. The entire time, Peter and John were whispering to each other. Peter looked anxious. What if he was scheming or trying to plan a rescue for the prisoner? Eventually, Jimmel asked Peter, "Were you with the man called Jesus?" Was that the captive's name, I wondered? Jesus? Peter stopped whispering to John and said, "Of course not." The sun was beginning to rise, and I realized none of the roosters were crowing. Just about every other day, they'd be screaming before the sunlight reached the sky. No one seemed to notice, though, so I guess Jimmel didn't believe Peter's denial of knowing Jesus because he asked him again, except this time he accused him of attacking his cousin Malchus with a dagger. Peter stood up and said, "I know nothing of this man, Jesus. My business is none of your concern." And right as he finished, the rooster crowed just a few feet away from me. The air seemed to freeze. The look on Peter's face was so shocked and sad even. He ran out of the courtyard, and I think I heard him crying. After everything that's happened this week, I couldn't deny that something was about to happen. But I also knew that something bad had to happen first.
A shepherd in Jesus' culture was an odd figure. They were respected, but lowly. They slept where the sheep did. They were smelly. They didn't have the opportunity to take regular baths. Many of them would have been awkward in their social skills. You talk to sheep all day long. So when Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd," this would have sounded peculiar to the hearers at the time. What Jesus is saying there is, I'm not here to be highly esteemed. I'm here to find sheep. The Good Shepherd wants a comprehensive and intimate relationship with you. Jesus wants a comprehensive relationship in that, like a relationship between a shepherd and sheep. Sheep need constant care. They always need a leading presence. We need the same thing. And to know God, we must give all of who we are to Him. We must be comprehensive in what we give Him. And then He loves us fully. He loves us comprehensively. But God also wants an intimate relationship with us. And this imagery of shepherd shows us how Jesus feels about us. In John 10, verse 14, Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me." What does a sheep do when it is found? What does a lost sheep do when it hears the shepherd's voice after being gone? Strangely, the sheep panics. It runs around in a frenzy. And what must the shepherd do to bring in the sheep? He has to tackle the sheep. The shepherd must get dirty to save the sheep. The consistent use of that term sheep in the Bible to describe us isn't exactly a compliment. Sheep are slow, sheep are defenseless and clueless. They require a constant watch. We're the same way. We need an outside source. We're entirely dependent creatures, just like sheep. Sheep are not known to be the most intelligent of animals, but they are quite valuable. And at the time of Jesus, they would have provided wool, the skins were important, the meat could have been eaten. All of this was used and was a necessity in Jesus' culture. And that's the very core of the gospel. You'll never know how valuable you are to God until you know how helpless you are on your own. In John 10, verse 7, Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep." I'm the gate. What Jesus is saying is, I'm the door of the sheep. There's only one way into God's fold, and that is through Christ himself. But then we learned something about Jesus, that not only is he the shepherd, but he became like us. He's like a sheep. He's the sacrificial lamb. Isaiah prophesies about this. Isaiah 53, 6 through 7 says this: "We all went astray like sheep. We've all turned to our own way, and the Lord has punished him," that's Jesus, "the Lord has punished him for the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth." And here's the description: "Like a lamb led to the slaughter, and like a sheep silent before her shears, he did not open his mouth." He became like a lamb. He was slaughtered on our behalf. The reason he did this was to save the sheep. You see, when Jesus was on the cross, people mocked him. "Save yourself," they said. But he refused to save himself. And the reason is because he couldn't both save himself and save you. Someone had to die for sins. Jesus is the one who died. He's the one who paid the penalty for sin. Jesus took our place on the cross. Jesus became a lamb to save the sheep so that the sheep ultimately could be like the shepherd. He who knew no sin became sin so that we might become the righteousness of God. When John the Baptist saw Jesus, what did he say? He said, "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." He's not just a lamb, but the Lamb. Jesus isn't just a way, he's the way. There had been other lambs in the Bible that were ultimately pointing to this lamb. In Genesis 22, God tells Abraham, "I will provide a lamb." It was in reference to the sacrifice of Isaac and God stepping in and providing a sacrifice. And what Abraham was spared from doing, God actually did. Abraham didn't have to sacrifice his son. And that's pointing to the fact that God did. In John 3:16, we learned that God gave his one and only son. Lambs were what prevented the slaughter of the firstborns in Egypt in Exodus 12. There was a passing over of the homes who had made this sacrifice and put the blood on their doorposts. In each case, as you look at the story of the Old Testament, in each case, if a lamb is slain, then death does not have to occur. But the lamb has come. Why a lamb? There were other kinds of sacrifices in the Bible. Why not a bull or a goat or something else? Why a lamb? The reason is very simple. A lamb does not fight back. Jesus didn't fight back. He was a willing sacrifice. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, and like a sheep silent before her shears, he did not open his mouth. He did not fight back. And because the lamb was silent for us, we need to be loud for him. Revelation records the loud response of the church. The church responds loudly to the silent lamb. Revelation 5:12 says they said with a loud voice, the lamb who was slaughtered is worthy. Good Friday is quiet, somber. It's reflective. It's hard. An occupied cross brings silence. But something empty, a tomb, is about to create a commotion. What's one of the loudest things we can do as a church? Easter.